Commander Lack stood at the front of the class as her students for the semester filtered in. She was pleased to see that most species of the Confederation were represented. Teaching a diverse group was always more interesting than a bunch of hulking males from war races with limited brainpower. There were tiny Galatans, frail Nixos, and the forever unusual Toops finding their seats. Once all the seats were filled, Commander Locke remained silent at the front of the class, simply staring down any student who dared meet her gaze. Slowly, the noise in the room began to subside. Those she'd stared down looked around nervously. The Kakolankian Military Academy was famous for its disciplined instructors who conducted their classrooms the same way they commanded their troops. All had wartime experience, but Lack just stood there, offering nothing to the students but a firm stare from her deep red eyes. Soon, the class fell silent. All eyes pointed forward toward the infamous instructor. Lack hadn't tried to be infamous on purpose, but she enjoyed it anyway. It kept the annoying first years at bay. Finally, a brave Rubel spawn, after looking around for someone else to do it first, raised their hand. Immediately, the large black billboard-sized screen behind Lack erupted with light. On a field of black were blindingly white letters. "Put your hand down, Connor." Everyone turned to the Rubel spawn, who instinctively retreated into their shell. Almost as one, they turned back to Commander Lack, murmuring again, trying to figure out what was going on. "Hello, everyone," Lack said calmly. "Welcome to Human 101. The bathrooms are out the back door and to the left." Again, the room fell silent. Confusion colored the faces of the students, whose species allowed Lack to recognize the emotion. She assumed the rest were equally confused. Good, Commander Lack said to the student who had raised their hand. "Come down here." The Rubel spawn's head crept out of their shell, looking both ways. All the other students were staring at them, clearly uncomfortable. The Rubel spawn began to stand when Commander Lack interrupted. "This has been your first lesson in human," Lack shouted, gathering eyes back to the front of the room. "Their name isn't Connor. That's obviously a human name. Regardless, none of you are talking. I have your undivided attention, and you now know to keep your guard up in my class. I got exactly what I wanted without any consideration as to the proper way to get it. That, my dear students, is some human." The looks of confusion slowly changed into understanding. They'd most likely heard that this course was unorthodox from last year's upper-class beings, despite the ban on students discussing the class. Some students began to take notes. The large screen behind Lack lit up with a list of names and large white words in the same font as before. "Stop taking notes." The flash of light from the screen grabbed the note-taking students' attention. Murmuring erupted throughout the room. "What?" Commander Lack shouted. "Did you think I didn't know your names? That I had to make up the name Connor? Did you think I couldn't pick out specific students, their actions, and call them out directly by name?" The students with enough good sense looked abashed, and those that didn't still had their looks of confusion. The confused students weren't going to have a good time in her class. She'd see to it. "Stop making assumptions," Lack continued. "War is quintessentially unpredictable. Expect the unexpected, fog of war, and all those other terrible sayings. There's a reason those tired cliches have survived this long, despite being stupid. It's because they contain a grain of truth. And that grain of truth is more obvious with the humans than anyone else. Someone tell me why the Confederation lost its first war against humanity, Lack said. No need to raise your hand, just answer. They possessed revolutionary new tactics that gave them an insurmountable advantage that the Federation couldn't overcome, a small simpar squeaked. Oh, Lack marveled. General Cav, I didn't realize you were in my class. Shouldn't you be teaching history right now? Also, since when are you a Ciara? Lack gave her best impression of a human look she was quite fond of. Sarcastic. Don't regurgitate. Have an original thought. Anyone else? The room looked around nervously. No one wanted to be the next to speak until the Rupo spawn from earlier piped up. They kept catching the Federation forces off guard by being unpredictable and doing whatever it took to win. That's quite the original thought there, Commander Lack said. I guess I was right in picking on you. The rest of you could learn something from Trilly here. The Rubo spawn gasped at hearing their name called out. Lack hadn't been bluffing. There's a reason this class is called human, and not human tactics or human strategy. Humans do whatever it takes to win. They'll put themselves through unbelievable to win. Frankly, it's ridiculous what they'll put up with. Who here has seen the latest Brock Brockworth visual film? Not a trick. Just raise your hand if you've seen it. Still apprehensive, hands slowly came up until nearly everyone in the room signaled they'd seen the visual. Lack would have been surprised if they hadn't. Visual films about human exploits were wildly popular. And how cool was it when Sergeant McDavid broke his arm and couldn't use his rifle anymore? So he put his arm in a sling and kept fighting, using only a knife. Heads nodded in unison throughout the classroom. Except that's wrong, Lack scoffed. Humans are trained to fight and reload their gas rifles with only one arm. I saw it myself at the Battle of Monty. I was pinned down with a human private, a damn private, who could fight with one arm. Not that she had a choice. Her arm had been ripped off by one of those bugs. Lack spat the word bugs. She got me to tie a string around the stump, cinching the blood and stab her with morphine, a human painkiller. I took point, she covered my rear, and we got out of there. The trope of the noble human demanding to be left behind while their comrades escape is infuriating. A human will fight their way out from behind enemy lines, bleeding from a lost limb, before they give in to the... Did she make it? The Ciara asked nervously. No, Lack said solemnly. Her name was Private Connor, and she bled out 30 feet from our lines. Saved my life. Remember, humans aren't invincible. They just don't give in to the... That is the core of this class, Commander Lack said, recomposing herself. Humans will put up with and put themselves through incredible amounts of... They'll make up plans and do it anyway. How are you supposed to counter a plan from a foe that doesn't follow their own damn plans? Because that's what you'll have to deal with if you ever fight against humans. I fought against and alongside them, and I'll tell you this, war is, and no one deals with better than humans. Commander Lack stared at the student, waiting for them to answer. The small Ciara replied hesitantly. The digestive leftovers from a large grazing earth mammal. Commander Lack stared at them in near disbelief. This is your second course with me. You have to realize that's not the right answer. The small Ciara looked down in shame. This isn't over, Lack said, just wanting it to be over. I will break you. You're going to have an original thought if it kills me. Lack took a deep breath from her ammonium tank to calm herself. "Well, that was a terrible start to the course," Lack said, changing the subject. "Let's move on to the main focus of this section, observing human soldiers. It's time for a field trip." The large hall erupted with excitement. Students were talking to each other and gesturing wildly. Some were even standing up, ready to file out the door. "And where do you think you're going?" Lack asked the impulsive students. Everyone froze. This was her second class teaching them in the past few months, so they knew they'd up. The only reason they knew it had been months was because Commander Lack insisted on using human timekeeping in her classes. Organizing data month, day, year was a perfect example of the dumber side of human. "Answer the question," Lack repeated. "Where exactly do you think you're going? Give me coordinates." The students awkwardly looked at each other. Slowly, some of the faces on which Lack could recognize emotion realized her point. She waited until most of the class got it. This group wasn't half bad. Usually, it took students a lot longer to figure it out. Even the small Ciara had gotten the point. For those of you who don't get it yet, answer me this. How far is it to the closest human establishment? Embarrassment spread across the faces of the rest of the students, or at least what passed for faces in the case of her 3 gully students. Accurate intelligence is worthless if you don't remember to use it. The closest human planet is 42 light years away. You all know that. We studied the Treaty of Proxima B last term. Did you think I charted a starliner for us? Sit your dumb asses down. As the students shuffled back to their seats, the large black billboard-sized screen behind Lack lit up as the room lights dimmed. The image resolved itself to gasps. The screen holographically projected a scene to the students, looking as though the front of the lecture hall had given way to reveal a stage. "This is a bar," Lack said, "the natural habitat of the human soldier." On the far side of the projection, the bar door opened as a human in fatigues entered, exposing the night sky behind them. It was noon at the Kakul-Lankian Military Academy. The bartender is a friend of mine and lets me tap into his security feed once a year for this class. Lack had more to say, but she knew she'd already lost the students. They were enthralled with the human bar scene. They were watching actual humans after having talked about them for so long. Of course, they'd seen other videos of humans, but those had been shot and staged for the purpose of viewing. This was different. It was the real thing. After 5 minutes, Lack shouted, "Call out interesting things you've observed." There's a group of 8 males all converging with 1 female, without much interaction with each other, a Rubel spawn shouted. "Good catch, Trilly. You'll encounter far fewer human females in your military service than males. One of the ways human sexual dimorphism presents itself is by human males having an easier time putting on and maintaining muscle than females. In the past, this was a very important distinction and meant most human soldiers were male. The cultural effects of this can still be seen today. Why would this be important to us as their commanders to note? Mating competitions, Annette offered. "Don't let a human catch you saying that," Lack said with her species version of a smile. "But yes, that's exactly what it is, and it'll ruin your human units if you don't come down like a tungsten rod on them when things start going wrong. Human courtship is a whole other kind of you can't let get out of hand. What else have you noticed?" The group at the bar appears to have abandoned their unconscious companion at a table to acquire more alcohol. And what do we say when a human offers us alcohol? No, thank you, the class chanted in unison. And what do we say when they offer again? Okay, fine, just one, they chanted in unison again. That's right. Inebriated humans want everyone to be inebriated with them. You can take advantage of that, to get inebriated for free, but be very careful because they will turn it into a competition, and you will lose that competition, just like the human lying at the table did. But I want you to watch their companions for a moment and tell me what you see. The students watched the group at the bar. Slowly, they started murmuring, and the Gallatin raised their tentacle. Most of them are looking back at their unconscious companion. I believe they're checking up on him. Good deduction. Those humans are letting their friend sleep it off, but they are still keeping an eye on him to ensure he's safe. You can tell the good humans from the bad ones by which ones take care of their companions after losing an alcohol-consuming competition. Anything else? The bar only had a couple more human occupants, so the students were starting to struggle to find something of note to mention. After 10 minutes of idle chatter, Lack drew the class's attention to a poorly lit corner with a single human sitting at a table alone. As the class turned to look, the human downed a glass full of brown liquid before pouring themselves another. Why this human? Lack asked her class. Why am I picking out this human? Or better yet, why is this human unique or unusual? The students watched the human carefully, trying to pick apart their every movement. It kind of looks like they're having a drinking contest against themselves, an Empire said. Good observation, Lack said as the human poured more translucent brown liquid into their cup. They now had 2 empty bottles on their table. But it would be more accurate to say they're having a drinking contest against their memories. Humans deal with better than anyone else, but that doesn't mean it doesn't take its toll on them. Some of the biggest humans pull is feeling like they need to deal with their alone. Well, feel is the wrong word. They think they should deal with it on their own, because otherwise they are putting other people through their... The class was quiet, while students pondered what Lack had said. Not reaching out for help when they should wasn't uniquely a human thing, but they were the worst for it. When was this recorded? Asked the Ruble Spawn. I like where your brain pan is at, Commander Lack replied. Of course, this would have to be a pre-recorded video in order for me to teach the lesson I wanted to teach. Here's the thing though, this is a live feed. Gasps came from the students that were biologically capable. They were looking side to side and talking with each other to try and figure out if she was tricking them again. She wasn't. If there's one thing you can guarantee to see at a human military bar, it's a human blaming themselves for something that isn't their fault. Lack turned her hardest face on her students. If you ever command human soldiers, you'd better recognize it when it happens, not if, when. Human soldiers have among the highest rate of suicide of all species. Survivor guilt is something nearly all of them will need to cope with. This is the negative side of human, and if you recognize the signs, you might just save a human's life. And trust me, it's worth saving. Commander Lack stood in the side room of the largest hall the Academy had to offer as she waited for students to take their seats for the first class of their final course before graduation. It was truly a special time. Soon, she'd never have to see these idiots again. Are you ready? She said, turning away from the viewport in the side door to the lecture hall. I hate doing this, the tall human in the room with her said. It's weird. You teach a class about us. Your wife is a xenobiologist, Lack replied. That's different, and you know it. Kara studies all non-carbon-based life, not one specific sentient species. You'll get over it, Lack said. Anyway, you owe me. It's degrading. I feel like a monkey in a zoo. She wriggled up and tapped him on the cheek a couple of times. Oh, honey, you are a monkey. Ha ha, you're a riot. Let's get this over with. I'll buy you a banana when we're done, he said, heading out the door and onto the stage. By the time Lack made it to the center of the stage, all the students had shut up, which was good. They were learning, or at a minimum, she'd called the herd. Her class size had shrunk since Human 101, but that wasn't unusual. Dealing with humans and their required a flexible mind, and some beings just weren't up to the task. Lack found this absolutely wild, considering the ability to adapt is the main thing biological life is supposed to be able to do. Like, that's just how evolution worked. How do you let down evolution? Well, by not surviving, she supposed. Which begged the question, how did these morons manage to survive long enough to make it to her class in the first place? Greetings, my lovely students, she announced to the hall with what passed for a smile in her species. How are you on this fine morning? Excited to nearly be done with your training? The students stared back at her in silence. She couldn't even make out the rustling of movement that was common for groups this big. Her face dropped to her usual scowl that was universally understood across all species. Damn, I must be losing my touch, she said. I didn't even get suing to fall for it. The small Sierra almost held it together, but Lack could tell they were beaming with pride on the inside. All right, without further ado, let me introduce to you the former Field Marshal for the Human Collective Armies, Liam Aborn, Lack said, gesturing to the side door. This time she got them. The room erupted with noise as the formerly still and silent students turned and started talking to one another. Lack had expected this. She intentionally kept the course outline from the students until this exact point. Every year, most of them had never met a human, and if they'd known this entire course was based around interviewing, talking to, and interacting with real-life humans, they would have been too excited to focus on Human 101 and 2011. Aborne walked out of the side door and onto the stage, doing his stupid, keep his hand by his waist while he waved thing that he did. For being the former leader of one of the most powerful military collectives in existence, he had very little in the way of stage presence. Here's how this course is going to work, Lack started. Every week, I will bring in a new human for you all to play with. You'll have the class period to ask them questions and chat with them. By the subsequent class, I want a detailed report on the interaction and the impression you got from them. You will also need to research their history, accomplishments, and failures before class to see how your impression of them in person does or does not correspond to your impression of them from their records. Aborn should be familiar enough to all of you that prior research shouldn't be necessary. You may begin questioning immediately. Every grasping appendage in the hall shot up into the air. Lack picked one at random. Is it true that you killed a tantor with your bare hands? Yes, Aborn replied, hand reflexively moving to his prosthetic leg. Did you really dive into panite-infested water and pull the crew of a downed helicopter out one by one? Yes. Did they really have to hold you back from going in for the pilot because you were collapsing with exhaustion? Well, they definitely held me back from going in again. That much is true. And did you really fly a fire-breathing winged lizard into a fortress to save a royal heir? Aborne looked back at Lack, who shrugged, bemused. You know, you really shouldn't believe everything she tells you, he said, turning back to the class. The students were all looking past him to where Lack was standing. She was giving them her famous look, which I'm now realizing is part of the lesson that she's been trying to teach you all along, Aborn continued, slapping his forehead. Damn it, Lack. Don't you ever let up. No, she replied, smiling. The questions continued for the next few hours, and she could see that some of the students had already picked up the human theme for this lesson. No matter how much you know or read about a human, you don't really know them until you've met them. It helped that Aborne was so different from his famous persona. Any last questions? Lack asked as the end of class drew near. Trilly, Lack's best student, who'd been oddly quiet, raised her hand. How do you know Commander Lack? Just like that, Lack was reminded why this unassuming Re-Albon was her best student. In a single question, she'd learn about Aborn, gain contextual information about why he was here, and learn about Lack's life before the academy, which until this moment she'd kept out of the classroom. Lack felt bad for Trilly's future enemy combatants. Aborn turned to Lack. I'm cleared to discuss classified materials, right? Lack nodded slowly. Aborn turned back to the class. We were joint commanders in repelling the Void Ravik invasion. The room erupted into chaos again. It was as though Aborne had told them the sky was falling, or EL was now impossible. He said it so casually, like the Void Ravik invasion wasn't the largest and most profound military event in generations. Quiet down, Lack shouted. How come you didn't tell us earlier? One of her 3 Garkin students asked. Because it has nothing to do with human. No, Aborn said, but making everything about yourself is some classic human, so let's do that. Who wants to learn more about your favorite professor here? I'll answer any question you want. He flashed a grin at Lack. Class went an hour longer than usual, which wasn't unusual when Aborne was around. He told them all about the Void Ravik invasion, and Lack, for her part, held her dignified pose, as Aborn made a point to tell embarrassing stories about her. Once the last students filtered out of the hall, she slouched down, taking pressure off her fluid-filled capillaries. They hurt like hell. You should really get that looked at again, Aborn said, falling into a chair. And you should really upgrade your prosthetic leg so standing for long periods doesn't hurt, Lack retorted. A pair of broken toy soldiers, huh? Lack rolled all 8 of her eyes and made a mental note to talk to her class about how humans like to spout pseudo-philosophical when they get old. Tell me about it, Lack said instead. Thanks for coming and helping, by the way. I hope you know how much I appreciate it. Although, did you really have to tell them about the fried chicken incident? That wasn't part of the plan. How could I not tell them? Aborn said, pulling an outline for the lesson that included everything up to and including the Void Ravik invasion. Do you think they realized we planned the whole thing? They're a good group, but they're not that good. Fair, Aborn said. Am I still on the hook for next year? That depends, she replied, getting up. Are you still sober? If I wasn't, Kara would have told you by now, he said, getting up as well. You know sponsors aren't supposed to blackmail their sponsees. And you weren't supposed to tell my students about the fried chicken incident. Even. They walked out of the hall together. You still owe me a banana,